Hello, I'm Donna Phelan. Welcome to Perspective. The Tournament of Roses Parade is one of the most exciting parades of the year, with 42 magnificent floats, 23 marching bands, 21 equestrian units, and a cast of over 700,000 spectators in attendance to watch the parade live. In addition, millions of people around the world watch the parade on TV. The Tournament of Roses Parade takes place in sunny Pasadena, California every New Year's Day. The Rose Parade dates back to 1890 and was created by the Valley Hunt Club. This year the theme is, "Oh, the places you'll go." This is the 124th celebration of the Rose Parade. The Grand Marshal is none other than Dr. Jane Goodall, the esteemed conservationist and advocate for African chimpanzees. In Torrance, California, a team of dedicated volunteers is putting the final touches on their impressive float for this year's Rose Parade. Torrance, which is the 8th largest city in Los Angeles County, has participated in the last 58 parades and won 13 awards in the last 16 years. But a stunning turn of events threatened to keep Torrance out of this year's parade. After 58 years, the City Council decided it could no longer fund the float. Without funding, Torrance would have to pull out of the Tournament of Roses. This would be the first time in 58 years that Torrance would not have a float in the Rose Parade. But the story has a surprise ending. Two volunteers who had decorated the float 2 years earlier decided that it was too important for Torrance to be in the parade and offered to sponsor the float. Kelly and Gary Johnson, President and Vice President of Ace Clearwater Enterprises, stepped in to save the day. They made a commitment to sponsor the float, and thanks to their generous donation, the Torrance float will be in the Rose Parade this year. Ace Clearwater Enterprises has been in business for over 50 years, with 3 locations in Southern California. They specialize in complex formed and welded assemblies for the aerospace industry. Kelly and Gary Johnson play a big role in the Torrance community and wanted to make a commitment to give back to the community. Ace Clearwater Enterprises set a precedent in corporate sponsorship of the Torrance float, forever changing the funding model. Whereas the float had always been publicly funded, it will now be privately funded. Kelly and Gary Johnson are very humble about their sponsorship of the Torrance float. To them, it is a matter of community involvement, civic pride, and ensuring that the legacy of the Torrance Rose Parade float continues. In appreciation, the City of Torrance asked Kelly and Gary Johnson to ride as VIP guests on the Torrance float. The theme of this year's Torrance Rose Parade float is Follow Your Dreams. It was created by Fiesta Floats and decorated with the help of hundreds of volunteers. It will be Torrance's 59th float in the Tournament of Roses Parade. Thanks to Ace Clearwater Enterprises. And now we're going to speak with the woman who is the ultimate authority on the Torrance float. She is Mary Hoffman, who served for 16 years as president of the Torrance Rose Float Association. With the love and support of her husband, Bob, Mary Hoffman oversaw every detail of the Torrance float creation, start to finish, before handing the gavel over to the current president, Misty Dawn Jones. I'm here with Mary Hoffman, who served for 16 years as president of the Torrance Rose Float Association. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you.
Tell me, how did you get involved in the float?
First, I was just a decorator, and then I joined the board, and then I became president, and after that, no one wanted to be president, and so I served for 16 years.
That's incredible. And during those 16 years, you actually won 13 awards.
That's correct, but it wasn't my doing. It was Fiesta Parade Floats and the fabulous job that their staff does.
Well, you've done a wonderful job with them. Tell me about the theme this year.
This year, the theme of the parade is "Oh, the Places You'll Go," and Torrance's float is called "Follow Your Dreams." It features children dreaming about what their future will look like.
That's exciting. I've seen a picture of the float and it looks absolutely beautiful, so I'm sure in person it's going to be exquisite. How many roses are used on the float?
This year there are going to be a total of 10,000 roses. 7,000 will be on the deck, and then there will be 3,000 on the actual rainbow. They're going to be using red, orange, and yellow roses.
That's exciting. I can't imagine applying 10,000 roses to a float. Tell me how the float is created.
Okay, they first start with a styrofoam mock-up of the float. Then they take the car chassis that they're using and weld steel to it to make the frame. And after that is all done, then they put a chicken wire over it, and then they use cocooning, where they put a foam coating on it that is white. Once that is done, then they color it in the colors that the float will be.
And you said that was kind of like paint by numbers.
Yes, that's correct. It's just like a giant 35-foot long paint by numbers design.
And then?
Well then, once the float is all constructed, they have the people come starting December 26th to decorate the float.
And actually the decoration of the float takes place in only 5 days.
That's correct.
December 26th through the 30th.
That's correct.
Which is an amazing concept that you're going to put 10,000 roses and other materials on the float in 5 days.
Yes.
What other materials do you use?
There's all kinds of different dried materials. Everything has to have been alive at one time. They use a lot of seeds, a lot of dried flowers that they cut, like statice and straw flowers. So there's a lot of different materials.
And how many volunteers do you have doing that?
We have approximately 500 volunteers throughout the 5 days.
That's amazing. And I understand the shifts are round the clock, is that correct?
Well, we start at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then that's our day shift, and then they have drive-ups that come throughout the day, and then they have an evening shift that starts at 6 p.m.
And you coordinate all of this?
Well, I sort of oversaw everything.
That's amazing. So Fiesta Floats has been creating a lot of the floats in the parade, haven't they?
Yes, they have. There's two major float sponsors, there are two major float builders.
Mm-hmm. And Fiesta, I know, I've heard their name on watching the float on television, the parade on TV, and they do win a lot of awards. They have beautiful floats. Right. And how long does the whole process start to finish? From the time that you start on the float, how long does that take?
Okay, they first present designs to the association in March. And then they start construction in the spring, and then they have it done by usually October, November.
October, November, and then they start building it, or it's built by then?
It's built by then.
And they store it until they bring it out in December, where the decorators come and decorate the float?
That's correct.
Tell me about the day of the parade, the Rose Parade. How do they stay so organized?
Well, the night before the parade, all the floats moved to Pasadena because the Fiesta floats are built in Irwindale. So they take a caravan of all the floats lined up in the parade order, and it takes about 7 hours. And they do not go on the freeways. They go on surface streets. They have a police escort. And 1 year, actually, somebody ran through a stoplight and hit one of the floats.
Oh, my.
So that was kind of a mess. But anyway, so once they get to Pasadena, then we have people that come and touch up the floats. And then we have guards that stay there all night. Then the next morning, we have when they actually get ready to start, the float riders are all there. And then as they move forward in the line, the bands and the equestrian units come off of side streets. So they go in order. So what you see in the parade is not how they actually were all lined up.
It looks very easy watching it on TV, but I imagine there's a lot more that's involved in that. So let me ask you, when they touch up the floats, what are they doing? Kind of putting the flowers back in place? And
if something got damaged, like the one that got run into, fortunately it wasn't Torrance's float, but another float, they try to do repairs and make it look as good as possible for the cameras.
Mm-hmm. And how do they steer the float?
Well, the car has the regular steering wheel and everything, and the driver sits inside the float, and then they have the observer that is able to see where it's going, and they have headsets that they talk back and forth, and the driver talks to the observer, and he tells him when he needs to slow down or turn left or turn right, and the driver of the float cannot see where they're going at all.
That would create a bit of a problem. How do they get around those corners?
Well, they have tournament people, right? The big corner they have to turn is when they go off of Orange Grove onto Colorado. And they have tournament people there telling them they have to like swing out so that they make the turn. And they practice in doing that back at Irwindale, so they're used to turning corners.
So you have almost professional drivers in there who've probably done this a few times.
That's correct.
And your husband Bob actually served as an observer on the float.
2 different years, yes, he was the observer.
Is that fun for him?
It was very nerve-wracking. He was very conscious of, wanting to make sure he did it correctly and was in the correct position, and it was very, for him, because he'd never done it before, it was challenging, but he enjoyed it.
And what's the most fun you've ever had working with the Torrance Rose Float Association?
Probably when we've won awards, just because the people that decorate are always so happy. You don't win any money or anything, it's just you get a banner going down in front of the float on parade day, and that excites the people who decorate it. So that's probably my favorite part.
That's very exciting because there are a lot of volunteers who put a lot of hours into that, and that must be very gratifying.
Right.
I want to talk for just a moment about Kelly and Gary Johnson of Ace Clearwater Enterprises, because they stepped up at the last moment and made a huge donation to sponsor the float and ensure that the float would be funded to go forward in the parade. Can you tell me about that?
Certainly. The City of Torrance has funded the floats for 58 years, and with the 2012 float, they said they would not be able to fund it anymore due to all the economic conditions. So they said that they wouldn't be able to help us. So Gary and Kelly Johnson of Ace Clearwater stepped up, and they have donated $85,000. The cost of the float is $150,000. And there's no way that the float could have gone on without their support. So it was just very exciting that they were willing to help out.
And how did they get involved?
A couple of years ago, a friend of theirs was celebrating their birthday, and the way they wanted to celebrate was to decorate the Rose Parade float for Torrance. And so that was their first experience of doing it, and then they heard that in 2012 that was going to be our last year, and so that's when they decided to come forward and make that lovely donation.
And I understand that they are very low-key about that, but that was a tremendous act of generosity to keep the float in the parade.
It was, and everyone is very grateful to them for doing this.
And they're going to be VIP guests on the float, aren't they?
That's correct. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson are going to be riding on the float, and so I'm sure they're very excited.
So tell me, what is the benefit to the City of Torrance of having a float in the Rose Parade?
Two things that I think are very important. One is the fact that it's a community project that a lot of people in the community are involved in. Torrance is the 8th largest city in the county of Los Angeles, but there are a lot of things that make it have a small town feel, and that's one of the things that does do it, in my opinion. The other thing that I think is a great benefit is the fact that the city of Torrance gets this worldwide publicity with the float being in the Rose Parade because it's shown in over 200 countries around the world. So I just think it's a wonderful experience. The other thing is that we have people that are between the ages of 13 and up in their 80s working side by side decorating the float, and it just shows the young people that the older people can contribute things, and it shows the older people that the young people, you know, are very nice young people. And then the other thing that it does is the publicity that the city gets around the world. The parade is shown in over 200 countries around the world, and I think it's just a wonderful way to publicize the city of Torrance.
That's outstanding, and it does create that sense of community, multi-generational, and it's fun.